The shot rang out from Yates Parker's Colt revolver, splitting the summer night like thunder, not at a man, never that, but at the heavens themselves. A single bullet of frustration as he stood alone on the ridge above Crestwood Valley, his eyes fixed on the ribbon of lantern light that streamed from the Wilton Ranch below, where Olivia Bennett was dancing at her engagement party with Thomas Wilton, the territory's wealthiest cattle baron. Colorado Territory, 1873. A place where a man's worth was measured by the land he owned and the cattle he branded. Yates had neither in abundance. "Damn fool," he muttered to himself, holstering his weapon and taking a long swig from his flask. The whiskey burned, but not enough to sear away the memory of Olivia's smile, the one she used to save just for him. They'd grown up together in this valley, the son of a horse trainer and the daughter of the town's only doctor. For 18 summers, they'd been inseparable fishing in Cottonwood Creek, racing horses across the open plains, sharing whispered dreams beneath star-filled skies. And for the last 3 of those summers, they'd been in love. Or so he thought. Yates mounted his dun-colored stallion, Copper, and urged him down the hillside away from the celebration. The memory of their last conversation played in his mind like a cruel ballad. "You're asking me to wait for what, Yates? For you to strike it rich someplace? For you to decide that settling down isn't such a terrible fate?" Olivia had demanded, her green eyes flashing with tears. "I'm asking you to wait until I can offer you more than a wanderer's life," he'd replied. 6 months, that's all I need in the silver mines up north." She'd looked at him then with such disappointment that it hollowed him out. "I've waited 3 years already. Thomas has asked for my hand, and I've accepted. He can give me stability, a home, a future, all the things you keep chasing over the next horizon." That had been 2 months ago. Now, here he was, watching from a distance as another man claimed the only treasure Yates had ever truly wanted. The party music faded behind him as he rode into the darkness. By morning, he'd be gone from Crestwood Valley. There was nothing left for him here now. Dawn broke over the eastern plains as Yates packed the last of his belongings. His father stood in the doorway of their modest cabin, arms crossed. "So you're running," Jacob Parker said. It wasn't a question. "Taking an opportunity," Yates corrected, tightening the cinch on Copper's saddle. "Heard they're hiring experienced riders for the new cattle drive routes out of Laramie. Better money than breaking horses here. That Bennett girl's got you all twisted up inside. Never seen you like this." Yates kept his eyes on his work. "She made her choice. And you made yours when you kept putting off asking for her hand." His father sighed, uncrossing his arms to place a weathered hand on his son's shoulder. "Life doesn't wait, son. Not for silver strikes or cattle fortunes or any man's pride." "I know that now," Yates said, his voice rough. "Learned it too late, seems like." "Maybe," Jacob conceded. "Or maybe life's got more chapters than you think." He pressed something into Yates's palm, his mother's wedding ring, a simple gold band that had been waiting for the day Yates would need it. "I can't take this," Yates protested. "You can and you will. Your mother would want you to have it, whether you use it tomorrow or 10 years from now." His father embraced him, the rare show of affection nearly breaking Yates's resolve. "Write when you can, and remember home's still here if you ever find your way back." Yates nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. He mounted Copper, took one last look at the only home he'd ever known, and rode north toward Wyoming Territory. Behind him, the church bells of Crestwood began to toll Olivia's wedding day had arrived. He dug his heels into Copper's sides, urging the horse to a gallop, as if he could outrun the sound. In the chapel at the center of town, Olivia Bennett stood before the mirror in her wedding dress, a confection of ivory satin and lace that her mother and the town seamstress had labored over for months. She looked every bit the bride she was supposed to be, except for the hollow look in her eyes. "You look beautiful, my dear," her mother said, adjusting the veil. "Thomas will be speechless." Olivia forced a smile. "Thank you, Mother." Her father appeared in the doorway, resplendent in his Sunday best. Dr. William Bennett had always been a handsome man, respected throughout the territory for his skill and compassion. Today he looked troubled. "Might I have a moment alone with my daughter?" he asked. Her mother nodded, smoothing Olivia's dress one last time before exiting. "What is it, Father?" Olivia asked once they were alone. "I saw Yates riding out this morning," he said gently. "Looked to be packed for a long journey. Olivia turned back to the mirror, adjusting her veil unnecessarily. He mentioned taking work up north. Olivia, her father's voice was gentle but insistent. Are you certain about today? About Thomas? Of course I am, she replied too quickly. Thomas is a good man. He'll provide for me, give me a comfortable life. Comfort isn't the same as happiness. Dr. Bennett took his daughter's hands in his. I married your mother for love, not cattle or land. I would want the same for you. Tears threatened to spill onto her cheeks. Yates had his chance. He chose adventure over me, time and again. That's the nature of young men sometimes. They need to find themselves before they can truly give themselves to another. Her father sighed. But if you love Thomas, truly love him, then I'll walk you down that aisle with joy in my heart. Olivia hesitated, then squared her shoulders. I'm marrying Thomas, father. He's here, he wants me, and he's ready to build a life together. That's more than Yates ever offered. Her father nodded, though the concern never left his eyes. Then, let's not keep your groom waiting. The ceremony proceeded as planned. Olivia Bennett became Mrs. Thomas Wilton beneath the stained glass windows of Crestwood Chapel, with all the town in attendance. If anyone noticed the bride's smile didn't quite reach her eyes, they were too polite to mention it, and miles away, Yates Parker rode toward a new life, his heart left behind in Colorado territory. 8 years passed like swift-moving clouds over the frontier. Seasons changed, the railroad pushed further west, and territories grew into settlements and then towns. Crestwood Valley flourished under the prosperity of the Wilton Ranch, which had doubled in size under Thomas's shrewd management. Olivia Wilton, now 28, stood on the wraparound porch of her grand home, watching her 7-year-old son, Daniel, play with the ranch dogs in the yard. Her life had settled into a predictable rhythm, managing the household, hosting dinners for Thomas's business associates, raising their son, and volunteering at the town's growing school. It was a good life, if not the one she had once dreamed of in her youth. Thomas was a fair husband, if somewhat distant. He treated her with respect, provided abundantly for their needs, and doted on their son. If their marriage lacked the fire of grand passion, well, that was the stuff of penny novels, not real life. She shaded her eyes against the afternoon sun as a rider approached from the north road, one of the ranch hands returning from town with the mail. Among the letters was one addressed to Thomas from his lawyer in Denver. More business correspondence? She asked that evening, as Thomas reviewed the mail in his study. He looked up, his expression unreadable. Actually, no. It's about Yates Parker. Olivia's heart stuttered at the name she hadn't heard spoken aloud in years. What about him? He's bought the old Henderson property on the north side of the valley. Carson says the paperwork was finalized yesterday. Thomas watched her carefully. I thought you'd want to know, given your history. That was a lifetime ago, Olivia said, fighting to keep her voice steady. I'm surprised he's returned. As am I. Last I heard, he was running some successful horse trading operation up in Montana Territory. Thomas folded the letter methodically. Carson mentioned he's not alone, has a young boy with him, his son, apparently. Olivia felt a strange twist in her chest. He's married, then? Widowed, according to town gossip. Wife died in childbirth some years back. Thomas's tone was neutral, but his eyes were sharp. The boy's about 6 now. Olivia nodded, absorbing this information. Yates, a father. Yates, a widower. Yates, back in Crestwood Valley after all these years. Well, she said finally, I suppose we should call on him, as a courtesy. Welcome him back to the valley. Thomas studied her face. If you think that's appropriate? Of course. We're the leading family in the area now. It would be expected. She busied herself straightening items on Thomas's desk, avoiding his gaze. Perhaps next week, when you return from Denver. As you wish, Thomas agreed, turning back to his correspondence. The matter settled. That night, Olivia stood at her bedroom window, looking out toward the North Valley, toward the Henderson property. Sleep eluded her, as memories she'd carefully packed away years ago resurfaced like spring floodwaters. Would he look the same? Would his laugh still rumble deep in his chest? Would he still smell of leather and pine? Would he remember how they'd once carved their initials into the old cottonwood by the creek, certain their love would outlast the ancient tree. Most importantly, would seeing him again reawaken feelings she'd convinced herself were long buried. The next morning brought news that shook the entire valley. Thomas Wilton's horse had returned to the ranch without its rider. A search party found him at the bottom of Crescent Ridge, his neck broken from the fall. The doctor estimated he'd been dead several hours by the time they reached him. Just like that, Olivia was a widow at 28, with an 8-year-old son and the largest ranch in the territory to manage alone. The funeral drew mourners from 3 counties. Thomas had been respected, if not beloved, throughout the region. His business associates, ranch hands, and neighbors all came to pay their respects to the man who had helped shape the valley's prosperity. Olivia stood stoically beside her son, accepting condolences with quiet dignity. Her parents flanked her, lending their strength as the long procession of mourners filed past. And then, at the edge of the gathering, she saw him. Yates Parker stood tall in a black coat that couldn't hide the breadth of his shoulders or the strength in his stance. 8 years had transformed the impetuous young cowboy into a man, his face more weathered, his sandy hair touched with the faintest hints of silver at his temples. Beside him stood a small boy with his father's bearing. Their eyes met across the churchyard, and for a moment the years fell away. Then Olivia looked down, breaking the connection, and turned to comfort her sobbing son. After the burial, as people gathered at the Wilton ranch house, Yates approached her. He removed his hat, revealing the same unruly hair she remembered, though cut shorter now. "Mrs. Wilton," he said, his voice deeper than in her memories, "I'm truly sorry for your loss." "Thank you, Mr. Parker," she replied formally, aware of curious eyes around them. "I understand you've returned to the valley." "Yes, madam. Bought the Henderson place. Planning to raise horses, start fresh." He gestured to the boy half hidden behind him. "This is my son, Joshua." The boy stepped forward, revealing eyes so similar to his father's that Olivia felt a pang. "Pleased to meet you, madam," he said with careful politeness. "The pleasure is mine, Joshua," she replied, then introduced her own son. "This is Daniel." The boys eyed each other with the cautious curiosity of children, while their parents maintained the careful distance of old acquaintances. "If there's anything you need," Yates offered, "anything at all, you just send word." Olivia nodded. "That's very kind, but we'll manage." "I don't doubt it." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You always were the strongest person I knew." Before she could respond, another mourner approached to offer condolences, and Yates stepped away with a respectful nod. But the seed had been planted. Yates Parker was back in Crestwood Valley, and despite everything, Olivia couldn't deny the flutter in her chest at the sight of him. The days following Thomas's funeral were a blur of legal meetings and practical concerns. The ranch hands looked to her for direction, the bank wanted assurances about loans, and Daniel needed comfort that she barely had the strength to provide. 2 weeks after the burial, Carson Wallace, Thomas's attorney and friend, sat across from her in Thomas's study, her study now. "The will is straightforward," he explained. "Everything passes to you, with provisions for Daniel when he comes of age." Thomas was very thorough. "Yes, he would be," Olivia agreed, remembering her husband's meticulous nature. "There is, however, the matter of the ranch itself." Carson looked uncomfortable. "Running an operation this size requires experience that, forgive me, you may not possess." Olivia bristled. "I've lived on this ranch for 8 years, Mr. Wallace. I understand its workings." "Understanding and managing are different matters, Mrs. Wilton. The bank has expressed concerns about a woman overseeing such a significant investment." "The bank's concerns are not my primary consideration," she replied coolly. "This ranch is my son's inheritance, and I intend to preserve it." Carson nodded, shuffling his papers. Thomas anticipated this situation. He left a recommendation that, should anything happen to him, you consider bringing in a partner with the necessary experience. He suggested several names. He slid a paper across the desk. Olivia scanned the list, recognizing most of the names as Thomas's business associates from Denver and beyond. Men who would likely expect to take full control while relegating her to a decorative position. "I'll consider it," she said, folding the paper and tucking it into her desk. "But I won't be rushed into a decision." "Of course." Carson stood to leave. But the spring cattle drive to Cheyenne is approaching. The preparations would normally begin now. After he left, Olivia sat in the quiet study, the weight of her new reality pressing down on her. Thomas had been many things, sometimes distant, occasionally cold, but he had managed their affairs with unmatched efficiency. She had been the perfect rancher's wife, maintaining the social connections that smooth business dealings and creating a comfortable home. Now she needed to become something else entirely. The following day, she rode out to inspect the northern pastures with Frank Murphy, the ranch foreman who had served Thomas loyally for years. The gray-haired cowboy pointed out issues with irrigation, fencing, and the health of the herd with gruff efficiency. "Begging your pardon, Mrs. Wilton," he said, as they rested their horses by a stream. "But what exactly are your plans for the ranch?" "To run it, Mr. Murphy," she replied simply. "To preserve it for my son." Murphy removed his hat, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's a hard life, madam, especially for a woman," she finished for him. "Perhaps, but it's my life now, and Daniel's future. The men are wondering if you'll sell or bring in a partner from Mr. Wilton's list." Olivia watched a hawk circle overhead, considering her words carefully. "Would you accept my authority, Mr. Murphy? Would the men?" The foreman studied her, then nodded slowly. "If you prove you can make the hard decisions, yes, madam. This crew respected Mr. Wilton because he knew the business, not because he wore trousers." Olivia smiled, her first genuine smile in weeks. "Then I suggest we focus on preparing for the cattle drive. I'll need to learn everything possible before then." Over the next days, Olivia immersed herself in the business of the ranch. She rose before dawn to review the ledgers, spent mornings in the saddle inspecting the property, and evenings studying cattle prices and market trends. Her hands, once soft and ladylike, grew calloused from work. Word of her efforts spread through the valley. Some admired her determination. Others wagered on how quickly she would fail. One evening, as she returned from checking the southern fences, she found a visitor waiting on her porch. Yates Parker, hat in hand, looking as uncomfortable as a cat in water. "Mr. Parker," she acknowledged, dismounting with the new ease she was developing. "What brings you here?" "Heard you were taking on the ranch yourself," he said directly. "Thought I might offer some assistance." Olivia raised an eyebrow. "That's very neighborly, but I suspect we have different ideas of assistance." "Probably," he agreed with a half smile. "I'm not suggesting you need a man to take over, if that's what you're thinking. Then what are you suggesting?" "A partnership of skills." He gestured toward the pastures. "I've spent 8 years breeding and trading the finest horses in Montana. Your ranch needs good mounts for the cattle drives, and I need grazing land that the Henderson place doesn't have enough of." Olivia studied him, trying to read beyond his words. "You're proposing a business arrangement?" "To start with," he acknowledged. "I could help with the cattle drive preparations, too. Give you another experienced voice beyond Murphy." The practical part of her recognized the wisdom in his offer. The guarded part of her wondered at his motives. "I'll consider it," she said finally. "But I won't be making any decisions until after I've consulted with my foreman." Yates nodded, accepting this. As he turned to leave, he paused. "For what it's worth, Olivia, I always knew you had this strength in you, even when we were young." The use of her given name, so familiar on his lips despite the years between them, sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the evening chill. "Good evening, Mr. Parker," she said, maintaining the formality between them. But that night, as she sat alone reviewing the ranch accounts, she found herself considering his offer more seriously than she had initially intended. The following week brought unexpected challenges. A late spring snowstorm damaged fences along the western border, allowing nearly 100 head of cattle to wander onto neighboring land. Then Daniel fell ill with a fever that kept Olivia at his bedside for 3 days, unable to oversee repairs. When she finally returned to the damaged section, she found the fence already mended and the cattle rounded up and returned. Frank Murphy explained with grudging admiration that Yates Parker and his ranch hands had taken care of the matter. "Said he was just being neighborly," Murphy reported. "Did a fine job of it, too. That man knows his way around cattle almost as well as horses." Olivia felt a complicated mixture of gratitude and irritation. She appreciated the help, but resented needing it, and resented even more that it had come from Yates. That evening, she rode to the Henderson property, now the Parker Ranch, according to the freshly painted sign at the entrance. The house had been renovated, she noticed, with new timber reinforcing the old structure and a corral for horses expanding behind it. Yates was working with a spirited bay mare in the training pen when she arrived. The years had been kind to him. He moved with the same fluid grace she remembered, his body lean and muscled from daily work. He spoke softly to the horse, his hands gentle but firm on the reins. He spotted her and handed the mare off to a ranch hand before approaching. "Mrs. Wilton," he greeted her, wiping his hands on a cloth. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "I came to thank you for your help with the fence and the strays," she said formally. "It was unexpected. Just being a good neighbor." He studied her face. "How's your boy? Heard he was sick." "Better now, thank you." She hesitated, then added, "I've been considering your proposal." Interest flickered in his eyes. "And I'm willing to discuss terms. The spring drive is approaching, and having your horses and expertise would be valuable." Yates nodded, trying to mask his satisfaction. "I'm free tomorrow afternoon, if you'd like to discuss specifics." 1:00, she agreed. "And Mr. Parker, this is strictly business, nothing more." A shadow crossed his face. "Understood, Mrs. Wilton." As she rode home, Olivia questioned her decision. Working closely with Yates would mean confronting the past she'd tried so hard to forget. But the ranch and Daniel's future had to come first. If that meant partnering with Yates Parker, she would manage her feelings accordingly. Little did she know that Yates was having similar thoughts as he watched her ride away. 8 years hadn't dimmed his memories of her, nor completely healed the wound of watching her marry another man. Now she was free, but bound by grief and responsibility, and he was bound by respect for her loss. Business, he told himself. Nothing more. At least for now. Their business partnership began cautiously. Yates supplied a dozen of his finest horses for the Wilton Ranch hands, and in exchange, his own small herd of cattle grazed on Wilton land. He attended planning meetings for the spring drive, offering insights that even Frank Murphy grudgingly admitted were valuable. Olivia maintained a careful distance, all Mr. Parker and Mrs. Wilton, even as they spent hours discussing cattle prices and grazing rotation. If their hands occasionally brushed while reviewing maps, if their eyes sometimes held contact a moment too long, well, neither acknowledged it. Daniel Wilton, however, had no such reservations about Yates. The boy, still grieving his father, found in Yates a patient teacher who showed him how to train a gentle pony, mend tack, and track animals in the woods. Joshua Parker, quiet and serious like his father, became Daniel's constant companion, the two boys forming a friendship that bridged the careful distance between their parents. "Your son has quite a gift with horses," Olivia remarked one evening as they watched the boys in the corral. "He gets that from his mother," Yates replied, a familiar sadness crossing his features. "Catherine had a way with animals I've never seen matched." It was the first time he'd mentioned his late wife, and Olivia felt a pang of something she refused to identify as jealousy. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. "It must have been difficult, raising Joshua alone." "It was," he acknowledged. "Still is sometimes, but we manage." He glanced at her. "As do you and Daniel." A moment of understanding passed between them, the shared experience of single parenthood, creating a connection where there had been only polite distance. "Thomas was a good father," Olivia said. "Different from you, more focused on teaching Daniel about business than horses, but devoted in his way." Yates nodded, accepting this glimpse into her marriage without comment. As preparations for the cattle drive intensified, Olivia found herself working alongside Yates more frequently. They rode the boundaries together, checking water sources and calculating grazing needs. Despite her initial reservations, she found herself appreciating his competence and his willingness to treat her as an equal partner rather than a widow to be protected. The evening before the drive was set to begin, the ranch hosted a traditional dinner for all the hands. Lanterns hung from the trees, casting golden light over tables laden with food. Musicians played lively tunes. And after the meal, many of the cowboys danced with local girls who had come to wish them well on the journey. Olivia, dressed in a simple blue gown rather than her now customary riding clothes, watched the festivities with a hint of melancholy. Last year, Thomas had presided over this dinner, confident and commanding. Now she stood in his place, respected but still proving herself. "You've done well," Yates said, appearing beside her with 2 cups of cider. "The men are ready, the herd is strong, and the route is planned down to the last detail." She accepted the cider, careful not to let their fingers touch. "We've done well," she corrected. "Your help has been invaluable." High praise from Olivia Wilton, he teased, a glimpse of their old familiarity breaking through. "Don't let it go to your head, Parker," she replied, surprising herself with the ease of falling back into their youthful banter. His smile deepened the lines around his eyes, new lines, earned in the years they'd been apart. "Would you care to dance, Mrs. Wilton, for old time's sake?" She hesitated. Dancing with Yates would signal something to the watching community, an end to her mourning period, perhaps, or a new beginning with her late husband's former rival. "One dance," she agreed finally. As friends and business partners. His hand at her waist was warm and steady as he guided her into the circle of dancers. They moved together with the natural rhythm they had always shared, their bodies remembering what their minds had tried to forget. "Do you remember the harvest dance, the year before I left?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Olivia nodded, the memory vivid despite the years. They had slipped away from the celebration, finding privacy in the old barn, where whispered declarations of love had led to passionate embraces, the furthest they had gone, before propriety reasserted itself. "I remember many things, Yates," she said carefully, "but we're different people now." "Are we?" His eyes searched hers. "Or are we just the same people who've weathered a few more storms?" Before she could answer, the music ended, and reality intruded in the form of Frank Murphy, approaching with last-minute questions about the drive. The moment broke, and Olivia stepped back into her role as ranch owner with practiced ease. But that night, alone in her bedroom, she found herself touching her waist where Yates's hand had rested, remembering the familiar feel of him after all these years. The cattle drive departed at dawn, a river of livestock flowing north toward Cheyenne under the guidance of 20 experienced cowboys. Yates rode with them as trail boss, while Olivia remained behind to manage the ranches, a traditional division that she had reluctantly accepted as practical for her first year. With the ranch quieter in the absence of most of the hands, Olivia focused on projects that had been neglected, repairing the schoolhouse roof, organizing community support for a new widow with 3 young children, and teaching Daniel more about the business side of ranching. She also found herself spending more time with Joshua Parker, who stayed behind with Ruth Coleman, the widow who kept house for Yates. The boy was serious beyond his years, with flashes of his father's dry humor and an observant nature that missed little. "Pa talks about you," Joshua said matter-of-factly one afternoon as he helped Olivia gather eggs in the hen house. "Says you were friends when you were young." Olivia nearly dropped the egg she was holding. "We were," she said carefully. "We grew up together in this valley." "He says you're the smartest person he knows," the boy continued, placing an egg in his basket with deliberate care, "and the stubbornest." A laugh escaped her. "That sounds like your father." Joshua looked at her with eyes so like Yates's that it made her breath catch. "He gets sad sometimes when he thinks I'm not looking, but not when he comes back from your ranch. Then he whistles." Olivia wasn't sure how to respond to this childish but astute observation. "Your father is a good man, Joshua. I'm glad we're friends again." The boy nodded, apparently satisfied, and returned to his egg gathering. 3 weeks later, a rider from the cattle drive returned with news that the herd had reached Cheyenne safely, and the sale had gone better than expected. The rest of the hands would return within days. Olivia felt a flutter of anticipation that she told herself was simply relief at the drive's success. When the cowboys finally rode into the ranch yard, dusty and tired but triumphant, she was there to welcome them home. Yates dismounted from Copper, now showing signs of age but still proud, and approached her with a grin that took years off his weathered face. "Mrs. Wilton," he greeted her formally, though his eyes danced with suppressed excitement. "I'm pleased to report the drive was a complete success." "So I heard, Mr. Parker," she replied, matching his formal tone despite her own smile. "Congratulations." Once the men had dispersed to clean up before the celebration dinner, Yates found her in the study, reviewing the preliminary sales figures. "We did better than expected," he said, closing the door behind him. "Your cattle fetch top dollar." "Our cattle," she corrected, looking up from the papers. "This success belongs to both ranches." He approached the desk, his hat in his hands. "There's something else. I took the liberty of speaking with some contacts in Denver about expanding our partnership." "Oh?" Olivia set down her pen, giving him her full attention. "There's growing demand for quality horses for the cavalry and for private buyers moving west. If we combined our operations more formally, your land and cattle with my horses and breeding program, we could build something significant." His eyes held hers. Something to leave to our children. The mention of their children Daniel and Joshua gave his proposal a weight beyond mere business. Olivia felt the implications hanging in the air between them. "That would be a substantial commitment," she said carefully. "Yes," he agreed, "it would." The double meaning wasn't lost on either of them. "I'll need time to consider it," she said, rising from her chair. "The ranch is still recovering from Thomas's loss, and Daniel is just beginning to adjust." Yates nodded, accepting her caution. "Of course. There's no rush, Olivia." The use of her given name was deliberate this time. "But I want you to know that my interest in this partnership goes beyond business." Her heart quickened, but she maintained her composure. "I suspected as much." "And?" he prompted, a hint of the young, impatient Yates showing through. "And I need time," she repeated more gently. "We both do." He accepted this with a nod, placing his hat back on his head. "Time it is then, but not too much, I hope. We've lost enough of that already." As summer turned to fall, the partnership between the Wilton and Parker ranches deepened. They shared resources, knowledge, and increasingly social occasions. Sunday dinners alternated between the two homes, with Daniel and Joshua's friendship serving as a bridge for their parents' careful rapprochement. The community noticed. Gossip flowed like the creek after spring rains, whispers about the widow Wilton and the widower Parker. Childhood sweethearts reunited by fate. Some thought it romantic, others deemed it disrespectful to Thomas's memory. Olivia ignored the talk, focusing instead on the reality of her growing feelings for Yates. He was not the impetuous young man who had left her heartbroken 8 years ago. Life had tempered him, given him patience and purpose. He was a devoted father, a skilled rancher, and increasingly, her closest confidant. For his part, Yates recognized the Olivia before him was not the girl he'd left behind. She had grown into her strength, managed grief and responsibility with grace, and built a life that didn't require a man's validation. He admired the woman she had become, perhaps even more than he had loved, the girl she had been. On a crisp October afternoon, they rode together to check on a new irrigation system being installed on the border between their properties. The aspen trees blazed gold against the blue Colorado sky, and the air carried the promise of winter. "Daniel asked me something interesting this morning," Olivia said as they dismounted by the creek. "He wanted to know if you were going to be his new father." Yates nearly choked on the water he was drinking. "What did you tell him?" "That you and I were friends and business partners," she replied, watching his reaction carefully. "And that any change to that would be discussed with him first." A diplomatic answer. He set down his canteen, gathering his courage, but not the one I might have hoped for. Olivia's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "And what answer would you have hoped for, Yates?" He moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "That you were considering it. That despite everything our past, Thomas, the years between you might be open to building something new, together." "I am," she admitted softly, "considering it." His face lit with hope. "Olivia, but I need to be certain," she continued. "For Daniel's sake, and for my own. Thomas and I had a marriage of practicality more than passion. I don't want that again." Yates took her hands in his touch sending warmth through her, despite the autumn chill. What we could have again, was never practical. It was always more. "We were children then," she reminded him, "and now we're adults who know the value of what we lost." He released one of her hands to touch her cheek gently. "I've loved 2 women in my life, Olivia. I was blessed to have years with Catherine, to have Joshua. But you were my first love, and when I saw you again after all this time, I realize you might also be my last." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes. Yates. Whatever she might have said was interrupted by the thunder of approaching hooves. They stepped apart as one of Olivia's ranch hands galloped toward them. "Mrs. Wilton," the young cowboy called, reining in his lathered horse. "There's been an accident at the ranch. Your son took a fall from the hayloft. Doc Bennett's with him now, but he's asking for you." Fear gripped Olivia's heart as Yates helped her mount her horse with urgent efficiency. "Go," he told her. "I'll follow with supplies from my place." She rode hard, fear for Daniel pushing all other thoughts from her mind. By the time she reached the ranch house, her father's buggy was already outside. Daniel lay in his bed, pale but conscious, with Dr. Bennett finishing a bandage around his head. "Mama!" the boy cried when she entered, reaching for her with his uninjured arm. "I'm here, sweetheart," she soothed, gathering him carefully into her embrace. "What happened?" "He and some of the Hand's children were playing in the barn," her father explained. "Climbing where they shouldn't have been. He fell about 8 feet, but thankfully landed on hay rather than the hard floor. He has a broken arm, a mild concussion and some bruises," her mother added from where she sat by the bedside. "But he'll recover completely with rest." Relief washed over Olivia as she held her son, murmuring reassurances. When Yates arrived shortly after with medical supplies from his ranch, he paused in the doorway, taking in the scene with concern. "Mr. Parker," Daniel called, brightening despite his injuries. "I fell just like you did that time with the wild Mustang." Yates approached the bed, ruffling the boy's hair gently. "So I heard, partner, but I think you landed harder than I did. Will you tell me the story again? About how you broke your arm but still got back on the horse?" Olivia raised an eyebrow at Yates, who had the grace to look sheepish. "I may have shared some of my more reckless youthful adventures," he admitted, "though I emphasized the lessons learned about safety." "Of course you did," she said dryly, but there was no real reproach in her tone. As evening fell, Dr. and Mrs. Bennett departed with promises to return the next day. Yates lingered, helping Olivia prepare a light supper for Daniel and ensuring the boy took the medicine Dr. Bennett had left. When Daniel finally drifted off to sleep, exhausted from his ordeal, Olivia and Yates retreated to the parlor. "Thank you for your help today," she said, sinking into a chair by the fire. "You're good with him." "He's a good boy." Yates settled into the chair opposite hers. "Reminds me of you at that age, determined, curious, braver than is sometimes wise." She smiled tiredly. "When I got word he was hurt, all I could think was that I couldn't lose him too. Not after Thomas." "But you didn't lose him," Yates reminded her gently. "And you won't. That boy has too much of his mother's spirit to be kept down for long." They sat in comfortable silence for a time, the crackling fire and the distant sounds of the ranch the only backdrop to their thoughts. "Our conversation by the creek," Olivia said finally, "before we were interrupted." Yates leaned forward, his expression serious. "I meant every word, Olivia, but there's no rush. Daniel needs you now, and this isn't a decision to make in haste." She studied him, this man who had once been too impatient to wait for their future together, now willing to give her all the time she needed. "What changed you, Yates?" she asked softly. "The boy I knew couldn't sit still long enough to watch a sunset, let alone wait for a woman to make up her mind." A shadow crossed his face. "Life has a way of teaching patience. When Catherine died, I was left with a 2-year-old boy who needed stability more than he needed a father chasing the next horizon. I learned to put down roots, to build something lasting." He met her gaze directly. "I learned what I should have known 8 years ago, that some things are worth waiting for." Olivia felt something shift inside her, a wall beginning to crumble. "And if I said I needed until spring to decide, then I'd wait until spring," he answered simply. "And if I said I needed longer, I'd wait longer," he affirmed, "though I might hope you'd put me out of my misery sooner." The half-smile that accompanied his words tugged at her heart. This was Yates, her Yates matured and steadied by life, but still carrying that spark of humor that had first drawn her to him. "I don't think I'll need until spring," she said quietly. Hope flickered in his eyes. "No?" She shook her head. "Today, when I thought Daniel was seriously hurt, I realized something. Life doesn't offer guarantees. Thomas and I had a solid marriage built on mutual respect and common goals. there was always something missing. She took a deep breath. I don't want to miss any more chances at happiness, Yates, for me or for Daniel. Yates moved from his chair to kneel before her, taking her hands in his. Are you saying what I think you're saying, Olivia? I'm saying I need a partner in life, in ranching, in raising Daniel, in building a future, someone who challenges me and supports me in equal measure. Her voice softened. I'm saying it might be time to see if what we had as young fools can be something stronger, as older, wiser fools. Joy spread across his features, lighting his eyes with the boyish enthusiasm she remembered. I think I can manage that. He leaned forward, hesitating just a breath away from her lips, giving her the choice, as he'd promised to do all along. Olivia closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that held the sweetness of first love and the depth of hard-won wisdom. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. We'll need to move slowly for the boy's sake. Of course, he agreed. Though I should warn you that Joshua has been not so subtly suggesting I ask for your hand since about a week after we started Sunday dinners. Olivia laughed softly. Daniel's been equally transparent. I think they've been plotting together. Smart boys, Yates murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Takes after their parents. As winter settled over Crestwood Valley, the partnership between Yates Parker and Olivia Wilton became the talk of the community. They were seen together at church, at town meetings, and riding the boundaries of their adjoining ranches. Their children were inseparable, and the hands from both properties worked together with increasing frequency. Yet they maintained a proper distance in public, respecting the conventional mourning period for Thomas. In private, their relationship deepened, built on shared memories, common goals, and the rediscovery of feelings that had never truly died. Christmas brought the first snowfall, and a celebration that combined traditions from both households. The Parker and Wilton families gathered at Olivia's larger home, with Ruth Coleman presiding over the kitchen and both ranch crews joining in the festivities. After the Christmas dinner, as the hands entertained themselves with cards and music in the bunkhouse, Yates found Olivia alone in the study. I have something for you, he said, producing a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. It's not much, but I'm sure it's perfect, she interrupted, accepting the gift with a smile. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its cover tooled with her initials, and an intricate design of cottonwood leaves, a reference to their special place by the creek all those years ago. It's beautiful, she whispered, running her fingers over the detailed work. I thought you might use it to plan our future, he explained. The combined ranches, the breeding program, the children's education, all your ideas in one place. The thoughtfulness of the gift, so perfectly suited to her practical nature, while still honoring their past, moved her deeply. I have something for you too, she said, retrieving a package from her desk drawer. Yates unwrapped it to find a silver pocket watch, clearly antique and recently polished to a high shine. It was my grandfather's, Olivia explained. He carried it across the plains when our family first came west. My father gave it to me after Thomas died, saying I should pass it to Daniel when he's grown. She paused, watching Yates examine the timepiece with reverent hands. But I want you to have it now, as a promise that our time has finally come. Yates looked up, his eyes bright with emotion. Olivia, A commotion from the main room interrupted them, the children calling for them to join in a game of charades. With matching smiles, they set aside their moment, knowing there would be many more to come. New Year's Eve brought a celebration at the town hall, with nearly every resident of Crestwood Valley in attendance. As midnight approached, Yates guided Olivia onto the porch, away from the crowd inside. I have a question to ask you, he said, his breath visible in the cold night air. One I should have asked 8 years ago. Olivia's heart quickened as he took her hands in his. Olivia Bennett Wilton, he began, using her full name with deliberate formality. When I left this valley, I was a fool who thought adventure mattered more than love. When I returned, I was a man who had learned that the greatest adventure is building a life with someone you love. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a ring not new, but polished to gleaming. This was my mother's. I've carried it with me since the day my father gave it to me, waiting for the right woman to wear it. He knelt before her, snowflakes catching in his hair. Will you marry me, Olivia? Will you join our families, our ranches, our lives? Tears blurred her vision as she looked down at this man, this boy she had loved, this stranger she had lost, this friend she had rediscovered, this partner she had chosen. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Yates, I will marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, cheers erupted from the doorway. Their sons had followed them outside and witnessed the proposal. They rushed forward, Daniel throwing his arms around his mother, while Joshua pounded his father's back in congratulation. Behind them, more faces appeared, ranch hands, neighbors, friends all smiling at the couple's happiness. Word spread quickly through the celebration inside, and soon well wishes surrounded them from all sides. "About time, Parker," called Frank Murphy, raising a toast with his whiskey glass. Dr. and Mrs. Bennett made their way through the crowd, Olivia's father clasping Yates's hand firmly. "Welcome to the family," he said, emotion thickening his voice. Again, the spring wedding of Yates Parker and Olivia Wilton was the social event of the season in Crestwood Valley. They exchanged vows beneath the ancient cottonwood tree by the creek, where they had once carved their initials as lovesick teenagers. Daniel and Joshua stood proudly as their parents' attendants, their matching suits and solemn expressions giving way to boyish grins when Yates finally kissed his bride to seal their union. The celebration afterward combined the elegance Olivia had always appreciated with the relaxed hospitality Yates preferred: fine china on trestle tables, champagne alongside locally brewed beer, a string quartet that gave way to fiddles and harmonicas as the evening progressed. As dusk fell and lanterns illuminated the dance floor set up on the ranch lawn, Yates led Olivia in their first dance as husband and wife. "Happy, Mrs. Parker?" he murmured, his hand warm at her waist. "Deliriously," she replied, her new ring catching the lantern light. "Though legally, I believe we're now the Parker-Wilton family, as agreed in our partnership papers." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Always the businesswoman. Always," she agreed with a smile. "But also, always yours, at last." As they danced beneath the stars, surrounded by their children, their community, and the land they both loved, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 8 years ago, Yates had watched from a distance as she married Thomas Wilton, both of them believing their chance at happiness together had passed. Now, life had granted them a second chance, one built not on youthful passion alone, but on shared purpose, mutual respect, and love that had withstood separation and sorrow. The merged Parker-Wilton Ranch prospered in the years that followed, becoming one of the most successful operations in Colorado. Their horse breeding program gained national recognition, supplying mounts to the cavalry and to wealthy buyers across the country. Their cattle drives remained profitable, even as the railroad changed the face of the western cattle industry. Daniel and Joshua grew into fine young men, joined 2 years after the wedding by a baby sister, Catherine Grace Parker Wilton, who inherited her mother's determination and her father's charm. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Yates surprised Olivia by taking her to the ridge above Crestwood Valley, the same spot where he had stood alone that night in 1873. Watching her engagement party at the Wilton Ranch. "I came here the night you got engaged to Thomas," he confessed as they spread a blanket on the grass. "Fired my gun at the sky and cursed my own foolishness for letting you go." Olivia leaned against his shoulder, watching the sunset paint the valley gold. "And now? Now I thank whatever fate or fortune brought me back here," he said, kissing her temple. "That gave us both a second chance to get it right." She turned in his arms, her face softened by happiness and the evening light. "We did get it right, didn't we? Eventually?" "Eventually," he agreed, capturing her lips in a kiss that still held all the wonder of rediscovered love. "Better late than never, Mrs. Parker Wilton." As darkness fell over Crestwood Valley, they remained on the ridge, planning their future and reminiscing about their past, no longer separated by pride or circumstance, but united in a love that had endured through separation, marriage to others, personal loss, and ultimately, joyful reunion. The cowboy had indeed watched her marry another once, but years later he had taken her hand as a widow, and together they had built a life richer and more fulfilling than either could have imagined in their youth, a testament to the enduring power of a love that refused to be forgotten, even across the vast distances of time and heartache.